Today on our channel, we are going to share an unbelievable story of a woman who had not one but two near-death experiences. Not only did she come back to life, she also brought shocking visions that will make you rethink everything you've ever heard about what happens after death. And the most shocking thing, she had a revelation about the fate of homosexual people in the afterlife. Stay with us until the end, because this story will change your view of life, death, and spirituality. If you like this type of content, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any new videos. My name is Margaret, and I have a story to tell that completely changed my life and my outlook on death. I was born in 1969 in Asheville, North Carolina. From the beginning, my life was marked by challenges. My birth was complicated, and when I was 7 days old, I suffered a stroke due to a medical error during a blood transfusion. Doctors declared me dead, but somehow I came back. My mother always said it was a miracle, that she prayed fervently asking God to let me live if I had any purpose in this world. I grew up with mild cerebral palsy. My left leg was shorter than my right, and I wore orthopedic braces for a long time. Pain was a constant companion, but I learned to live with it. My childhood was different from most children. While others played and ran, I watched from afar, aware that my journey was unique. Over the years, I have faced several health challenges. In 2009, I had an accident that almost took me due to an infection. But nothing compares to what happened after my son Ethan's 14th birthday. That's when I had an experience that changed everything I thought I knew about life and death. Today, at 54 years old, I look back and see how each challenge prepared me for what was to come. I am the mother of two wonderful children, Ethan and Grace, who are my greatest joy and the reason I chose to return. I completed my master's degree, something that previously seemed unattainable, and I continue to fight against my body's limitations with the same determination as always. My story is not about overcoming in the traditional sense. It's about accepting that there is more to existence than we can see or touch. It's about understanding that life and death are part of a greater journey, and that every moment here has a purpose, even if we can't always understand it. It was a day like any other when everything changed. I was at home, taking care of household chores. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, and the low sound of the TV echoed from the living room. Suddenly, I felt an intense pain in my head. At first, I thought it was just a bad migraine, something I was used to due to my health problems, but I quickly realized it was different. The pain was so intense that I could barely stand. I tried to call for help, but my voice wouldn't come out. I felt my body becoming heavy, as if I was being pulled to the ground. My vision began to darken around the edges, and a deafening ringing filled my ears. At that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. I remember falling to the kitchen floor, unable to move or call for help. Panic gripped me for a brief moment, but it was quickly replaced by a strange sense of calm. It was like my body knew what was happening, even if my mind hadn't fully processed it yet. The last things I remember before everything went dark were the smell of the coffee I had just made and the distant sound of the TV in the living room. After that, everything was silent and dark. I had suffered a stroke, and my heart and lungs had stopped working. Technically, I was dead. I don't know how long I stayed there on the kitchen floor before someone found me. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed to have lost all meaning. I later learned that it was my son Ethan who found me when he came home from school. He called 911 and paramedics arrived within minutes. All this time, I was somewhere else, having an experience that would forever change my understanding of life and death. What happened next is something I have difficulty describing in words, because there is nothing in our everyday experience that compares. When I left my body, the first thing I noticed was the absence of pain. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel any discomfort. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Initially, it was surrounded by complete darkness, but it wasn't a scary or threatening darkness. It was welcoming, like a warm hug. I felt safe and at peace, like I was wrapped in a soft, comfortable blanket. In this darkness, I realized that I no longer needed to breathe. It was then that I heard a gentle, loving voice, which I immediately recognized as Jesus. He told me to stop trying to breathe, that I didn't need to do that anymore. At that moment, I understood that I had left my physical body behind. The feeling was of absolute freedom. All the limits and restrictions that my body had imposed on me throughout my life had disappeared. There was no more pain, no more tiredness, no more physical limitations that I struggled with daily. It was as if my essence, my true self, was finally free to exist without barriers. In this state, I began to realize that I was moving, or rather floating. It was not a physical movement as we know it, but a kind of displacement of consciousness. I could see, but not with my eyes. It was a different perception, as if I could feel and understand everything around me without needing my physical senses. The darkness began to dissipate, giving way to a soft, comforting light. This light did not come from a specific source. It seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. It was as if I was immersed in an ocean of light and unconditional love. While floating in this indescribable peace, something extraordinary happened. A familiar figure began to materialize before me. At first, it was just a hazy outline, but little by little it gained shape and clarity. My heart, if I still had one in this state, jumped when I recognized who it was. My father, Jonathan. He had passed away 6 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. The last months of his life were marked by pain and suffering, and seeing him now was like witnessing a miracle. He wasn't the father I remembered from his last days, frail, haggard, and consumed by illness. He was my father, as I saw him in the old photos, young, strong, and full of life. Her eyes sparkled with a vitality I hadn't seen in decades, and her smile radiated a love and peace that seemed to illuminate the entire environment around us. When our eyes met, I felt a wave of emotions so intense that, if I had been in my physical body, it would certainly have brought me to my knees. Love, joy, longing, all mixed into an overwhelming experience. We don't need to exchange words. Communication happened on a deeper level, through pure thoughts and emotions. In an instant, we shared thousands of memories. I relived the moments when he taught me how to ride a bike, the nights he read me stories before bed, the comforting hugs in difficult times. But they weren't just memories. It was as if we were reliving those moments in real time, feeling each emotion with multiplied intensity. My father smiled, and in that smile was all the love and affection we had always shared, but also a deep understanding that went beyond anything we had ever experienced in life. He reached out to me, offering me the chance to go with him, to leave behind all the difficulties and pains of earthly life. For a moment I was tempted. The idea of being there, in that place of infinite peace, with my father was incredibly appealing. I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. All the worries, fears, and anxieties I carried simply dissolved. It was a feeling of absolute freedom, of total acceptance. But then, like a movie playing before my eyes, I saw images of my children, Ethan and Grace. I saw their faces, heard their laughter, felt the warmth of their hugs. I thought about how they still needed me, about all the things I still wanted to see them accomplish, the graduations, the weddings, the grandchildren that maybe one day I could have. I felt a strong tug on my heart, an almost physical need to be there for them. My father seemed to understand my thoughts without me having to express them. His smile widened, full of understanding and love. There was no disappointment in his eyes, just acceptance and a pride that warmed me inside. He nodded softly, and I knew it was okay to choose to go back. There was no judgment, just unconditional love. In that moment, I felt a deep connection not just with my father, but with everyone who had ever left. It was as if I could feel the love of all my ancestors, a lineage of souls that extended far beyond what I could imagine. I understood that death was not an end, but a transition, a continuation of the soul's journey. My father then began to show me scenes from my life, moments that I had forgotten or hadn't given due importance to. I saw the impact that my actions, even the simplest ones, had on other people's lives. A smile for a stranger on the street who was having a difficult day, a word of comfort for a friend in a moment of sadness, an act of kindness that I no longer remember doing. I understood that every act of kindness, every word of comfort, had a much greater effect than I imagined, creating waves of positivity that spread far beyond my knowledge. I also saw moments where I failed, where I could have been kinder or more understanding. But there was no judgment in these views, just a deep understanding that every experience, positive or negative, contributed to my growth and the growth of those around me. My father then showed me something that left me amazed. I saw how my life was connected to countless others, like an intricate cosmic tapestry. Every choice I made, every interaction, had ramifications that extended far beyond my immediate circle. I understood that my journey on Earth was far from over, that there was still a lot to be done, a lot of love to be shared. When I looked at my father again, I saw tears in his eyes, not of sadness, but of a deep, transcendental joy. He hugged me, and in that hug I felt all the love in the universe. It was a moment of perfect communion, of total understanding. As we parted, he placed his hand on my heart, or whatever my self was in that state, and I felt a transfer of energy, of wisdom. It was like he was giving me a part of himself to take back with me. The last words I heard from him, not spoken but felt in the depths of my being, were, "Always remember this love. Take it with you and share it with the world. I will always be with you." And then, gently, the image of him began to fade, but the love and peace I felt remained. I knew it was time to continue my journey, taking this transformative experience with me. I was ready for the next step, whatever it was. After the emotional meeting with my father, I felt a subtle change in the environment around me. The welcoming light that surrounded me began to gradually dim, and I became aware of the presence of a new entity. It was a luminous, radiant figure that I can only describe as an angel. It didn't have the stereotypical appearance we see in paintings or sculptures. It was more like a concentration of light and energy, with a presence that conveyed infinite wisdom and compassion. The angel didn't speak in words, but I felt his intent clearly. There was something more I needed to see, a crucial part of my journey that was about to begin. With a gentle gesture, he invited me to follow him, and I, driven by a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, accepted. As we advanced, the landscape around us began to change drastically. The comforting light gave way to an unsettling twilight. The air, if I can call it that, became heavy and oppressive. It was as if we were descending into a deep valley, shrouded in shadows and mist. When we finally arrived at what seemed to be the bottom of this valley, the sight I saw was heartbreaking. Before me stretched a panorama of suffering that I could never forget. Countless souls roamed this place, each carrying their own aura of pain and anguish. Some seemed lost and confused, wandering aimlessly as if looking for something they couldn't find. Others were motionless, bent over in positions of deep despair. There were those who screamed in silence, their mouths open in silent screams that seemed to echo in the vastness of that dark place. What shocked me most was recognizing among these suffering souls people who I could easily identify as part of the LGBTQI+ community. I saw men and women whose expressions of pain seemed amplified by a sense of rejection and non-belonging that I knew well from the world of the living. This vision deeply disturbed me. My best friend, Sarah, was a lesbian, and the idea that she could end up in such a place filled me with terror and anguish. Was this the fate reserved for those whom society often marginalized and rejected? Could it be that love in all its forms was not enough to guarantee a place of peace in the afterlife? With a heavy heart and a mind full of questions, I turned to the angel. I didn't need to verbalize my doubts. He seemed to instantly understand the whirlwind of emotions that consumed me. The answer came not in words, but in the form of understanding that formed in my consciousness. "No," the angel explained, "these souls were not there because of their sexuality or gender identity. The suffering they experienced had no relationship to who they loved or how they identified. The problem, I realized then, was much deeper. These souls were trapped in this valley of shadows because, during their earthly lives, they had lost connection with their spiritual purpose. It wasn't a question of sexual orientation, gender identity, or any other aspect of their personal identity. It was a matter of disconnection with divine love and the purpose of their existence. The angel then guided me among the suffering souls, allowing me to feel, for brief moments, what they were experiencing. It was an overwhelming experience. I felt the weight of fear, guilt, regret. I experienced the anguish of missed opportunities, of unspoken words, of unexpressed love. I saw souls who had lived lives of hatred and intolerance, now consumed by remorse for their actions. Others who had isolated themselves from the world, afraid of being hurt, and now desperately yearned for connection. There were those who had pursued wealth and power at the expense of their integrity, and now found themselves empty and disoriented. Among them, I saw members of the LGBTQI+ community who had internalized society's prejudice, living lives of denial and self-rejection. Their suffering was not because of who they were, but because they did not allow themselves to live and love authentically. I then understood that true hell was not a place of eternal punishment imposed by a vengeful divine being. It was a state of being, a condition of the soul that had turned away from love and light. It was the continuation and amplification of the negative and limiting patterns that these souls had cultivated in life. The most painful thing was realizing that these souls were not trapped there by some external force. The shadows that surrounded them were projections of their own fears, guilt, and limiting beliefs. The darkness of the valley was a reflection of the inner darkness they had cultivated in life. Yet even in this place of deep sadness, I could see sparks of hope. From time to time, a soul seemed to awaken, as if finally understanding the nature of its suffering. In these moments, I saw beings of light, similar to the angel who guided me, appear to offer comfort and guidance. The angel explained to me, through that silent and direct communication, that no soul was condemned to remain in that state forever. The Valley of Shadows was a place of reflection and learning, no matter how painful it was. Each soul had the potential to awaken to the truth of their divine being and find their way back to the light. This revelation brought both relief and profound sadness. Relief in knowing that suffering was not eternal, that there was hope even for the most tormented souls. Sadness to realize how much self-imposed suffering there is, how much time some souls spend trapped in negative patterns of thought and behavior. Before we left the Valley of Shadows, the angel allowed me to send a thought of love and light to all those souls. It was a simple gesture, but I felt as if a wave of positive energy emanated from me, touching every being in that dark place. For a brief moment, the valley seemed a little less dark. As we drove away, I took with me profound lessons. I realized that each of us has a responsibility to cultivate love, compassion, and connection in our lives. I understood that our choices and actions have consequences that go far beyond our physical existence. More than ever, I felt the importance of living an authentic life, aligned with our spiritual purpose. I understood that love, for oneself and for others, is the most powerful force there is, capable of dispelling even the densest shadows. I came away from that experience with a renewed mission, to spread light and love wherever I went, to help others find and live their purpose, and to never again let fear or judgment stop me from fully loving and accepting myself and others. After the intense and disturbing experience in the Valley of the Shadows, I felt a subtle shift in the energy around me. The angel guiding me seemed to shine with a renewed intensity, and I realized we were about to make another transition. It wasn't a journey in the physical sense, it was more like the reality around us dissolved and reformed into something completely new. Suddenly I found myself immersed in an environment so beautiful and serene that it almost took my breath away, if I was still breathing in that state. It was a spiritual colony, a place of indescribable light, peace, and harmony. The contrast with the Valley of Shadows could not be more striking. The first thing I noticed was the light. It was not a blinding or directed light, but a soft, omnipresent glow that seemed to emanate from everything and everyone. The colors were more vibrant than anything I had ever seen on Earth, with shades I didn't even know existed. The air, if I can call it that, was permeated with a palpable vital energy, as if every particle was alive and conscious. All around me I saw structures that vaguely resembled buildings, but were fluid and ethereal, subtly changing shape as I observed them. They were gardens of indescribable beauty, with flowers and plants that seemed to sing a silent melody. Fountains of crystal clear water sprang up in several places, and the water seemed to be alive, dancing and sparkling with a joy of its own. But what impressed me most were the souls that inhabited this place. I saw beings of every shape imaginable, and some that I couldn't even imagine. There were those that looked human, others that were pure light, and still others whose shape constantly changed. The most surprising thing was that, despite this incredible diversity, there was a sense of unity and harmony that permeated everything. Among these souls, I recognized many who could be identified as part of the LGBTQI+ community. I saw same-sex couples walking hand in hand, individuals whose gender expression transcended any earthly definition, and beings who seemed to simultaneously embody masculine and feminine aspects. What was most impressive was that here, in this place of light and love, these characteristics were not a matter of prominence or separation. They were simply another expression of the infinite diversity of creation. I observed how these souls interacted with each other. There was no judgment, prejudice, or discrimination. Each being was accepted and loved unconditionally, valued for their unique essence. What mattered was not external appearance or personal preferences, but the love each person carried and how they were aligned with their true spiritual purpose. I saw souls engaged in various activities. Some seemed to be studying, absorbing cosmic knowledge that went beyond my understanding. I observed groups gathered around what resembled energy screens, where complex images and symbols danced and transformed. Other souls were creating, producing works of art and music of transcendental beauty. I saw colors being painted in the air itself, sculptures of light taking shape through pure thought, and I heard melodies so beautiful that they made me cry with emotion. There were also those who seemed to be in deep meditation, radiating a peace that touched everyone around them. These souls seemed to be connected to something much greater, as if they were channels for universal wisdom. What struck me most was the sense of purpose and joy that permeated everything. Every soul seemed to be exactly where they were supposed to be, doing exactly what they were supposed to do. There was no rush, competition, or anxiety. Everything flowed in perfect harmony, like a synchronized cosmic dance. As I watched, I noticed something fascinating. The souls seemed to communicate without words. It was a direct exchange of thoughts, emotions, and ideas, much richer and deeper than any conversation I had ever had on Earth. I saw beings sharing memories and experiences as if they were tangible objects, passing them from one to another in spheres of sparkling light. The angel who guided me explained, through that silent and direct communication, that this spiritual colony was a place of healing, learning, and growth. Souls came here after leaving earthly life, or between incarnations, to recover, reflect on their experiences, and prepare for new challenges. I learned that there were many colonies like this, each with its own focus and purpose. Some were dedicated to the study of the arts, others to cosmic science, still others to healing and service. Souls had the freedom to choose where they wanted to be, based on their own growth needs and what they had to offer. One of the most beautiful things I witnessed was the healing process. I saw souls newly arrived from Earth, still carrying the weight of their earthly experiences, being greeted with so much love and compassion that it was almost tangible. Groups of more experienced souls gathered around these newcomers, surrounding them in healing light, helping them process and release trauma, fears, and limitations. I was particularly touched to see the special care given to souls who had experienced rejection and discrimination in their earthly lives due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. Here they were welcomed with a celebration of their uniqueness, helped to heal deep wounds and recognize their intrinsic value as unique expressions of the divine. This insight brought me a profound understanding. What really matters is not who we love or how we identify, but how we live our lives in relation to others and the divine. The love I saw in this colony transcended any earthly definition or limitation. It was pure, unconditional, and universal. As I took it all in, I felt a change in myself. It was as if layers of fear, judgment, and limitation were dissolving. For the first time, I truly understood the meaning of unconditional love and total acceptance. Before we left the colony, the angel allowed me to interact more directly with some of the souls. I exchanged words with beings who had lived lives I could barely imagine in distant times and places. I shared moments of deep connection with souls who, despite being so different from me, felt like old friends. One of these souls, who introduced himself as an ancient shaman, shared with me a vision of the cosmos that expanded my consciousness in ways I never imagined possible. For a brief moment, I could see the interconnectedness of all things, the delicate balance that keeps the universe in harmony, and the vital role that each being plays in this great cosmic symphony. As we prepared to leave, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to stay, to dive deeper into this experience of pure love and knowledge, but another part knew that he still had a journey to complete, lessons to learn and share on the earthly plane. The angel, sensing my thoughts, assured me that what I had experienced and learned here would not be forgotten. It would be integrated into my essence, influencing my choices and actions even if specific memories became hazy. I left the spiritual colony with a full heart and an expanded mind. The experience had fundamentally changed my perspective on spirituality, love, and acceptance. I realized that divine love is truly universal and unconditional, embracing all ways of being and loving. I carried with me a new mission, to bring a little of this light, this unconditional love, and this total acceptance to the physical world. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that the world often resists these higher truths. But I also knew that every small act of love and understanding could make a difference, creating ripples of change that would spread far beyond what I could see. With this renewed understanding and clear purpose, I was ready for the next stage of my journey, whatever that may be. While in this state between worlds, I felt a deep connection to something greater than myself. It was as if I could see the entire fabric of the universe, understand the purpose of each thing. In this moment of clarity, I had to make a crucial decision: stay in this place of peace and understanding or return to my earthly life. I thought about my children, Ethan and Grace. I visualized their faces, I remembered their smiles, their dreams and aspirations. I thought about all the things I still wanted to see them accomplish: the graduations, the weddings, the grandchildren that maybe one day I could have. I felt a strong tug on my heart, a need to be there for them. At the same time, the peace and freedom I felt were tempting. Here there was no pain, there were no daily struggles against the limitations of my body. It was tempting to leave everything behind and embrace this suffering-free existence. But then, I heard that gentle voice again. They were not exact words, but a deep understanding that formed in my consciousness. It was as if I was being told that my journey on earth was not yet complete, that I still had a purpose to fulfill. I saw flashes of the future, not specific events, but sensations and impressions. I saw that my presence would make a difference in the lives of people I had not yet met. I saw that my experience, if shared, could bring comfort and hope to others. I understood that life on earth, with all its difficulties and challenges, was a precious opportunity for growth and learning. Every moment of pain, every obstacle overcome, every act of love contributed to the evolution of my soul in a way that would not be possible in this spiritual realm. With a mixture of reluctance and determination, I made my choice. I decided to go back. The moment I made that decision, I felt like I was being pulled back into my body. The sensation was of diving into deep waters, returning to the surface. Before leaving, I received one last message. To always remember the love and peace I experienced here, and try to bring some of that light to the world. I promised myself that I would do my best to fulfill this mission. The process of returning to my body was intense and disconcerting. It was like I was being squeezed, forced back into a space that now seemed too small. The pain, which had completely disappeared during my out-of-body experience, returned with a vengeance. I opened my eyes and the light seemed blinding and painful. The sounds around me were loud and confusing. I realized I was in a hospital, surrounded by doctors and nurses. I heard voices saying it was a miracle, that I had come back. My first coherent thought was about my children. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore from the breathing tube. A kind nurse offered me water and calmed me down, saying that my family had been informed and were on their way. In the days that followed, as I recovered in the hospital, I tried to process everything I had experienced. It was difficult to put into words what I had experienced. How can we explain that peace, that unconditional love, that deep understanding of the universe? When my children were finally able to visit me, I cried when I saw them. Ethan and Grace looked scared and relieved at the same time. I hugged them as tight as I could, grateful to have the chance to be with them again. The doctors were perplexed by my recovery. They said it was unusual for someone to survive such a severe stroke, especially without significant neurological consequences. To them, I was a fascinating medical case. For me, it was confirmation that my experience had been real and that I had come back for a reason. As I grew stronger, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. Colors seemed more vibrant, sounds clearer. I felt a deeper connection with the people around me, as if I could feel their emotions. It was as if my senses had been heightened, not just physically, but spiritually. In the months following my near-death experience, I faced an emotional roller coaster. On the one hand, I felt deeply transformed by the experience, with a new perspective on life and death. On the other, I struggled with feelings of loss and doubt. The news of my niece's death from swine flu, a few days after my return, shook me deeply. I wondered why I had been spared while she, so young, was gone. It was difficult to reconcile the peace and love I had experienced with the pain of loss here on earth. There were times when I wondered if Jesus would regret allowing me to return. Life seemed harder now, weighed down by the weight of the knowledge I had gained. How to live a normal life after having glimpsed what lies beyond. I shared my experience with Ethan and Grace. We cried together as I tried to explain what I had experienced and why I had chosen to return. They listened with a mixture of fascination and fear, understanding the weight of my decision. I spent sleepless nights, going over every detail of my experience, fearing that I might forget something important. At the same time, I wondered if it had all been real, or just an elaborate hallucination created by a brain deprived of oxygen. I sought support from groups of people who had also had near-death experiences. Hearing their stories helped me come to terms with my own. I realized I wasn't alone, that many others had experienced similar things. Little by little, I started to find a balance. I accepted that I might never have all the answers, but that the experience itself was a gift. I learned to live with the mystery, to embrace doubts as part of the journey. The loss of my niece, although painful, taught me about the preciousness of life. I began to see each day as an opportunity, each interaction as a chance to spread some of the love I had experienced on the other side. Over time, I learned to integrate my near-death experience into my everyday life. It wasn't an easy process, but gradually, I found a new balance. The experience gave me a unique perspective on life and death, which has come to influence every aspect of my existence. I started to value the little things more, the smile of a stranger, the birdsong in the morning, the hugs from my children. The pain and physical limitations that had once bothered me so much now seemed less important in the vastness of what I had experienced. I decided to go back to school and completed my master's degree, something that previously seemed unattainable. I watched my children grow up and achieve their dreams, Ethan's marriage, Grace's promising career. Each of their achievements was confirmation that my decision to return was worth it. At age 54, I started using orthopedic devices again, but this time with a different attitude. Instead of seeing this as a limitation, I saw it as another opportunity to overcome, another chance to learn and grow. My relationship with spirituality has changed profoundly. It was no longer about following a specific religion, but about seeking a direct connection with the divine in all aspects of life. I started meditating regularly, seeking to reconnect with the peace I had experienced. I started sharing my story with others, not to convince them of something, but to offer hope and a different perspective on life and death. I was surprised by how many people felt touched by my story, and how it helped them deal with their own fears and losses. Today I see life as a precious opportunity for learning and growth. Every challenge, every joy, every interaction is a chance to evolve spiritually. Death no longer scares me. I know it's just a transition to another state of being. My near-death experience taught me that love is the most powerful force in the universe. It is what connects us to each other and to the divine. Now I try to live each day with gratitude, compassion, and love, knowing that each moment is a precious gift.